Alright, hope you guys did enjoy that small montage. I'm Hex. I won't be going over my MagDK near Perma Corrosive 1 bar build. I will have timestamps on screen and down below if you're looking for anything specific. But without further ado, let's get into the build. So the first set we run is Potentates, most commonly referred to as Potato. 2-piece reduces your damage taken from players by 3%, and 3-piece reduces the cost of your ultimate abilities by 15%. Very solid, makes our ultis cost really cheap. The more expensive they are, the more you benefit from percentage reduction. And Corrosive, well, I think it goes without saying, it's very expensive. So I do run a Dagger of Potentates, and for some reason I ended up just noticing right now that I was actually running a Mace of Potentates, which is actually not the way you want to run it. For this build, you'd want to run, I would recommend a Dagger, and then any other weapon that isn't a Mace. So like double Dagger, Dagger and a sword, or even Dagger and an axe would actually make you chunk really hard. Just don't run a Mace, because it gives you pen. When you're Corrosive, you have 100% pen, so kind of useless. So, but yeah, things you don't realize until after PvP. So the next that I run is Bloodspawn. Bloodspawn, I mean, come on, look at it. When you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate 13 ultimate and get 37-31 resistances for 5 seconds. This effect can occur every 5 seconds. So in a Corrosive, you're more than likely going to be getting 2 procs to this. So that's at least 26 ultimate you're going to get in 1 Corrosive. And my next set that I run, my most favorite set that I can't believe I actually get to make a build of it and actually make it viable, is Tavas. What exactly is Tavas to those that don't know? Well, Tavas, 5-piece. When you dodge an attack, you receive the Blessing of Tava, generating 12 ultimate over 3 seconds. This effect can occur every 3 seconds. So when you roll dodge an attack, you get this buff. You generate 4 ultimate a second. That is stronger than minor and major heroism combined, because those proc every second and a half. This one procs every second, so this thing is very powerful. The only problem is you do have to roll dodge, so try not to roll dodge too much or else you're going to burn your stamina and die. I will get into that a little bit more, like how to play this playstyle, like kind of generate your stam. Okay, so next I do run 1 training, obviously because it gives us extra free health. A little side note, actually PvPing without this, I was actually running 4-piece potato the whole time. So on all those clips you're seeing in this video, they were all with 4-piece potato. You don't want that. You want 3-piece potato and 1-piece training. Don't be like me. Make sure you're running 3-piece potato and 1-piece training. And if you can't afford training, that one other set, I don't remember exactly what it's called. It's that one set that gives you like 12 set bonuses. A 1-piece of that will be perfectly just fine. And then obviously Oakensoul. So for the traits, for the weapons, I do run a charged and a decisive. I think this is the best way. We want charge because if we put a burning effect on a player, we proc our combustion passive, which gives us magic back. Also, we do run, spoiler alert, Oakensoul overload on this build. So if we proc a burning and we kill them, well, they're going to chain react to the next person, and then that kid's going to die, and yeah, that's how we 1vx on this build. Now, obviously decisive, since we have so much sources of ult gen. Every time we proc ult, we have an extra chance of proccing 1 extra ult, so, not much said about that. So for the enchants, I would prefer to go 1 shock, which I do have here. And actually thinking about this one, either go poisoned or preferably go a berserker and increase weapon and spell damage enchant on this. It'll make you hit so hard. But right now, I just don't know why I have this, actually. I really need to change this. Just lets you know that, like, even if you don't full min-max this build, you still hit like a Mac truck and just do so much ridiculous damage. Next, we do run full impen on the body, and for the enchants, I would recommend trying to do full tri-stat if you can. If you can't, tri-stat the big pieces. What I mean by that is legs, chest, and head. And if you can't do that, full max mag will be perfectly just fine. Just adjust your health attributes. For the weights, I do run 3-3-1, 3 heavy, 3 light, 1 medium. So for the heavy, I run a heavy Bloodspawn helmet, heavy chest of Tavas, heavy shoulder to Bloodspawn. And for the light, I run a light waist, light gloves, and light feet of Tavas. And for my medium, I do run a medium legs of Tavas. For the jewelry, I do go full infused weapon damage on this build. Like on this build with so much ult gen, you don't really need to stay on this build. Like it's just crazy with the amount of ult gen, because the battle roar with ult gen on a DK is just unheard of. If you are having a little bit more sustain issues, or if you feel like you're uncomfortable enough, you can always just run 1 infused, reduce mag cost. That would be perfectly just fine. But honestly, I feel like just having all this weapon damage will just hit so hard, your heals are so fat. You just sustain off your pots and battle roar, you'll be perfectly just fine with that. So the reason that you'd want to use full weapon damage instead of spell damage on this build is because DKs do have a nice little passive here in Mountain's Blessing and their Earthen Heart. When you cast an Earthen Heart ability, you and your group gain minor brutality for 20 seconds, increasing your weapon damage by 10%. So this is the reason we want to stack weapon damage, because if we do spell damage, we don't benefit at all from this passive. So that's the reason why. So for the food I run, if you are not comfortable, this is your first time playing DK, I would recommend running Orzavka's, or the purple version of it, Jewels of Misrule. Gives you a nice line of max health and also gives you recov. If you want to do the most damage and have some recov, I did run Witch Mothers. It was a little hard in the stamp sustain, so that was a little bit more, I I did have to focus on my stam, but if you don't want to focus on your stam and you just want to W key somebody or just, or Zalkas, and you will be able to just W key anybody you want. And for the pots, this is the main part of the build. We do run minor heroism pots. What are heroism pots actually? Heroism pots are just like tripods. The only thing is you're swapping out health for heroism, minor heroism. So restore mag, restore stam, and grants you minor heroism, generating 1 ultimate every 1.5 seconds. So the problem with this is these things are very expensive. I believe on Xbox NA right now they are like 3 or 4K a pop. So basically every time you chug one of these, you're basically chugging 1,000 gold. So this is a pretty pricey build, so just be careful with that. I will have alternatives if you don't want to spend too much money on heroism pods. Feel free to look at that. Alright, but enough of that, let's get into the skills now. Alright, so the first skill we run is Coagulating Blood. Basically our main heal. Heal for X amount, increasing by up to 50% based on our missing health. Also gives us major fortitude, increasing our health recovery, which is always a joke to read. Next skill I do run is Elusive Mist. Honestly, I just love Mist so much. I live and die by Mist. Dissolving the darkness, reducing your damage taken by 75%. Also granting you major expedition while on the channel. Entering this form removes CCs and immobilizations. Big asterisk always next to that. Grants immunity to CCs obviously, because you'll see, you'll get CC'd out of this thing for whatever reason. So for Elusive Mist, honestly, this is the only build I would put Race Against Time. A Race Against Time is a very strong option on this, since you are bursty. Being able to just have minor force on there, and just because there'd be times where I leave someone at 5%, and if I had minor force, I would have one-shot them. That's always another option. But Elusive Mist does give you an extra 300 weapon and spell damage when you come out of the mist, which actually does affect your heals, unlike minor force, doesn't affect your heals at all. Next we do have Resolving Vigor, a small hot, heal, X amount for over 4 seconds. Next we do have Flames of Oblivion. This is our main spammable. You launch 3 flames up to 3 targets, dealing X amount of flame damage. This is mainly to proc our next skill, Molten Whip, lash an enemy dealing X amount of flame damage. Whenever you activate a different flame ability, you gain a stack of Seething Fury, increasing the damage of your next Molten Whip by 33%, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 75 for 10 seconds. So that's it. Like we get an extra 225 weapon and spell damage, and nearly do double damage with our whip. Let's just see how much we can pop this up into. You pop this skill 3 times, and look at that, a 19.2k flame whip, and an extra 225 weapon and spell damage. And you also look cool as hell. I mean, look at that. You get a flame aura around you, and your eyes glow. Your eyes glow like fiery. Like that looks so cool. And the next skill we run obviously is Corrosive, limiting incoming damage to 3% of your max health. While active, this ability and your direct damage dealt ignores enemy physical and spell resist. So I mean, Corrosive is like one of the most broken ultimates in the game. I'm surprised this thing hasn't been touched. But I guess it's not really the Corrosive that's broken. It's just everything else that lets you get Corrosive faster. So it's broken, to be honest. Because this ultimate is very expensive. Look at that, at a whopping 184. So being able to break that, getting ulti faster, it's kind of the reason that Corrosive seems overpowered, but it's just ult gen that's overpowered. Another thing too with Corrosive, it's kind of hard to see. You really can't see someone's in Corrosive, especially when they have a Dragon's Blood. When they're see-through like this, you can't see them. You can't see that Corrosive on them. But not much to say about the skills. Now let's go over the stat sheets. Alright, so for the stat sheet, these are the stat sheets if you do end up going Orzhkovka's or Jewels of Mistral. They should be similar to these. Your max mag should be around 21.6k. Magic recovery should be 1.6k. Actually, just pop real quick to see how much we can bump that up actually to. Look at that, over 2k recoup. That's really good. Our stam recoup is at 1700. Like, what? On a mag build. We have literally no spec in the stam recoup. All comes from the food and 1 line of Tavas, which is, we'll never say no to free stam recoup, because any build without stam is dead to rights. Our health is sitting at just over 34k, which is amazing, and our max damage is over 16k. Our weapon damage, before we buffed, our weapon damage is at 5500. Our weapon and spell crit is at 30%, and our penetration doesn't really matter since we're trying to be in Perma Corrosive. That's when you really do want to go offensive. Our spell resist is at 22.4k, and our physical resist is at just over 20k, and our crit resist is just shy of 2200. Really good stats. For the attributes, I do go 32 points in the magic and 32 points in the health, and obviously the more health you have, the more intimidating you look. For this build, I am a dark elf. I would say Dark Elf was a really good choice. We do get dynamic, increasing your max mag and max stam by 1910. Max mag obviously means more damage, and max stam means we can, be able to CC break or get an extra free roll dodge, because, if you get caught on a CC with no stam, well, hope there's a cube nearby for you to res that. Resist flame increases your flame resist by 4620. This is obviously really good, The main counter to this build is DKs. Funny to think that the way to counter a MagDK is to use another MagDK. It's just a little funny. And then we do have Ruination, increases our weapon and spell damage by 258. You know, obviously this increases our heals and damage. I'll never say none of that. Probably the best for this build would be Imperial. If you want to just push the fastest Corrosive possible, it would be full Imperial. Nor would be a second. The fact that I was able to pull this off on a Dark Elf means that, you know, this build isn't fully min-max, so you could min-max this build even more if you wanted to. I do run the Atro. Increases your mag recup by 310. Really good, really solid. You know, we'll never say no to an extra free mag recup. I am a stage 3 vampire. Obviously, any open world build should always be stage 3 vampire. Mostly for undeath. Reduces our damage taken by up to 30%, depending on missing health. But enough of that. Let's go over the CP. So for the blue CP, I run Focus Bending, increases our healing done with single target heals by 10%. Master at Arms increases your damage done with direct damage attacks by 3%. Deadly Aim increases your damage done with single target attacks by 6%. And obviously Oko Overload, whenever you kill an enemy under the effect of a status effect, they violently explode for up to 12.8k Oblivion damage. Of course, there's Oblivion damage, nothing can mitigate this. For the red CP, I do run Celerity, increases our movement speed by up to 10%. Survival Instincts, while afflicted with the status effect, your core combat skills cost 25% more. That affects like CCs, blocking, roll dodging. Pain's Refuge, reduces your damage taken by 2% for every 2 negative effects up to a maximum of 20%. And Violence Vitality, increasing our max health by up to 1400. For the green CP, doesn't really matter. The only ones I would recommend if you are running this is to run Liquid Efficiency. If you are running the Minor Heroism pots, whenever you use a potion or poison, you have a 10% chance not to consume it using the Minor Heroism pots. And trust me, those pots are very expensive. So if you can get this, because you know, any way to save a little bit of cash on your build, then the better. And Gifted Rider. Now let's go over the combo rotation / playstyle. So this is an Oakensoul build, so there's not really much to talk about. We really do only have five skills plus an ultimate. We do have a Burst Heal and Coag and are hot with Vigor. So the way to play this build is basically all you do is a light attack, weave Flames of Oblivion, light attack with Flames of Oblivion, light attack with Flames of Oblivion, and then you can either finish off with a whip or you can just keep applying the pressure like that. And that's pretty much it. And then when you see them drop to like half health, you hit them with a whip and good night. The thing that makes Flames of Oblivion so obnoxious is that it does proc the Warmth passive. When you deal direct damage with an Ardent Flame ability, you reduce the enemy's movement speed by 30%. And the crazy thing about Flames of Oblivion, it actually does give you nice cleave. There have been times where I'll kill 3 guards and absolutely nuke somebody with Occult. It's kind of funny seeing that. So, you know, being able to just hit extra targets and then having them proc Occult on the main target does happen more often than not. The main thing with this build is you want to roll dodge and keep Tavas up for the most part. But the problem is when you roll dodge, you do have a 4-second duration where the cost of roll dodge. You see that? See the little stacky thing going up, and every time I roll dodge, I can't even roll dodge. It's too expensive now. As soon as that little thing goes down, I should be able to roll dodge. Another thing I do like to do is before I pop my Corrosive, if I know my Corrosive is coming up in a few seconds, I'll pop my buffs and I'll actually just go in on them and just start hitting them with my spammable, right? I'll chunk them a little bit, but then they'll see me drop to half. They'll be like, oh my god, he's actually dying. Let's, you know, zerg that kid over. As soon as that happens, you pop your Corrosive, you shoot back to full, and then you just whip some kid into oblivion, and they won't know what happened. But let's go over the pros and cons of the build. So with any build, obviously there are pros and cons. Let's just start with the cons. The cons of the build is this build is very expensive. If you do run the Minor Heroism pots, this build will run you very, you know, a lot just on your pots alone. The sets themselves are pretty easy to get. Tava is crafted, potato, purple is just fine. Getting potato weapons might be a problem. But other than that, like the pots is just what really makes the build really like hard to do. Like, these pots are very expensive. They give it like you're chugging basically almost 1,000 gold every time you chug a pot. But trust me, these pots are just so good. Obviously, if you don't want to run these or can't afford these, I will have an alternative in the alternative soon. The next con is this build is very micro intensive. What I mean by that is you do have to manage a lot of things. You have to keep an eye on your resources. You have to keep an eye on your ulti gen. You have to keep an eye on Tavas. It's a lot of things you got to keep up. Another con is you do live and die by the Corrosive. That leads into the pros. Once you pick up this build and you get past those two things, this build is just ridiculously powered. Like, the things I can do on this build, I could not do it on any other class. My Magpar could not even do half the things my MagDK was able to do. Like, I'm just able to permanently 1vx the world and Corrosive being able to get away. I can nearly indefinitely kite kids around a tower if I wanted to, really, with this build. Now let's go over the alternatives of the build. So the alternatives for the build, if you don't want to run the Minor Heroism pots, there is a small way around it. On this little CP down here, for the blue CP, there is a passive called Hope Infusion. Healing yourself or an ally under 50% health grants them Minor Heroism for 1 second for every 300 magic recup you have. This effect can occur every 10 seconds. Current duration, let's just pop a pot real quick. So now it should be at 6 seconds. You can run tripods, Another alternative would be to swap out one of these, that probably more than likely Deadly Aim again, and put on Reaving Blows. Whenever you deal direct damage, you heal for 8% of damage done. So if you're in a Corrosive, you're basically, if you pop Flames of Oblivion, you hit 3 targets, you're more than likely just going to shoot back to full every time. Which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I might actually just start running on this build right now. Why talk about it? Actually do it. So for the skills, you could obviously run Race Against Time instead of Elusive Mist. I don't have Race Against Time on this tune, and I just cannot be bothered to grind Sigic on so many. Plus, I just love Mist so much. The things you can do with Mist, you really can't do on anything else. And don't even get me started if you have a Corrosive and an Elusive Mist. You really can't swap out too much of the build, or else it doesn't even become an ult gem build. This build honestly was one of the most fun builds I've ever had. From the moment I used my first fully proc multi-whip, I fell in love with the build. Like when I hit, like the first whip I hit, like fully stacked, was a 13k crit whip on them, and they just got bursted into oblivion. Or no, was it 15k? I believe it was like a 15k whip I hit on someone for crit. And like that's just crazy, man. Like the survivability on this thing, like crit healing for like nearly 17k with Coag at times. It's just the most fun build I've ever had, honestly. Like, you can do so much. I thought the Magplar was pretty busted. The MagDK honestly takes the crown for the most broken Oakensoul user in the most broke, not user, abuser. Let's just say that. It's not even a user, it's an abuser of Oakensoul. But the survivability, I've never had any survivability quite like this build before. Hope you did enjoy the build video. Like the video if you liked it. Comment your thoughts or experiences with the build. Also anything I might have missed on, what build video I should do next. Subscribe for more. Hope you do enjoy the rest of the small montage. But most importantly, stay zerging.